Hi, I'm Michael Aboud, founder and chief executive officer of Tetherview. Welcome to Controlling IT Chaos. This is a podcast where we bring together business leaders and cybersecurity experts to explore the evolving world of cyber attacks and the cutting edge solutions companies and governments are using to protect their networks. This podcast series is brought to you by Columbia University's Center for Technology Management. Today, I'm excited to be joined by RP Eddy. RP is the founder and CEO of Ergo, an intelligence and advisory firm which serves governments and corporations, and hailed by Harvard Business Review as breaking from industry orthodoxy with a radical new model. He is the co-author of best-selling and award-winning Warnings, Finding Cassandra's to Stop Catastrophes. I'm going to have to ask you about that, RP.
Yeah.
While described a pandemic like today's, how to prevent it. Eddy led the process to build the first White House policy on pandemic disease. Foreign Policy magazine noted RP as one of the U.S.'s most esteemed terrorism and national security experts. So let's kind of go talk about the book real quick. Tell us about that. What was that title?
Oh, first, Michael, it's so nice to be here. Thanks so much. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Warnings, Finding Cassandra's to Stop Catastrophes, co-authored with the great Richard Clarke, basically comes from, in larger extent, his personal experience, smaller extent, my personal experience, warning of different catastrophes inside government or watching warnings we ignored come to fruition. So it begins with this premise that we'll talk a lot about today, I believe, that the future is susceptible to research. And what that means is there's a number of tools available to us that can help us understand what might be around the corner. We'll get into some fidelity on that topic, I hope. One theory we propose in the book Warnings is what you could call Cassandra theory. We have something called the Cassandra coefficient. And I better tell you what Cassandra is real fast. I'm going to lose you. Cassandra was a mortal who was cursed by a Greek god to be able to see the future. Not such a bad thing, except the future she could see was catastrophes. She could only foretell catastrophes. She lived in Troy. Don't forget the Trojan horse that's coming in our story. And in her dreams, her nightmares, she saw her family and her brothers get burned to death in her city. And she would warn them over and over and over. They mocked her. They ridiculed her. And then, of course, she had to sit and watch this happen. She had to watch her city burn and her family burn. Cassandra's accurate warning was ridiculed and ignored, and catastrophe struck. That's who Cassandra is in our narrative. And unfortunately, there are so many of them that are right, that warn us, and that we ignore. The list goes back as far as the story of mankind to Cassandra, and unfortunately, it continues to happen just about every week. The list of Cassandras: the Challenger disaster, Madoff, Fukushima Daiichi, the nuclear disaster in Japan, Chernobyl, the rise of ISIS. The list goes on where catastrophes struck that had massive cost, where we ignored highly credentialed warnings, highly credentialed warners giving us very specific warnings. Now, to be fair, if you're paying attention so far, you're thinking, I can't listen to every Chicken Little on the street corner, every person carrying a sandwich board. I get it. We're talking about effectively like multi-degreed, often PhD experts in the technical science that says, hey, that Challenger that you're going to launch tomorrow, the O-ring, that rubber, which I built, said Nathan Beaujolais from the subcontractor, if you launch that thing, it will fail and you will have a bunch of dead astronauts. Because I built it. I'm the scientist. I'm telling you it's going to happen. Well, of course, we all know what happened with Challenger. They launched it, and 88 seconds later, we lost the crew in a horrific explosion that most of America witnessed live. So that's a great example of a Cassandra. They abound. The thing that's fascinating about this is there's something called Black Swan theory. I'm sure you're quite familiar with it by Nassim Taleb. And I think it's totally wrong. So Black Swan theory is right when it says you should be anti-fragile. Of course we should. Big part of cyber resilience, etc. But it's wrong when it says we can't predict these catastrophes, because we can. Cassandra theory is one example. So that's the book. Ton of fun to work with my mentor, Dick Clarke. It was a bestseller. It won an award. I do recommend it. We did predict we didn't predict. We said here are 7 future catastrophes with people who might be Cassandras, warning of them right now. should we look at them? We rated them on our Cassandra coefficient, meaning are they Chicken Little or are they Cassandra? And one of those 7 was a pandemic. We wrote that in 2017. I'm sorry we were right, but many people were. Of course, the pandemic was the most predictable catastrophe I think we've seen in recent memory.
So it's interesting, and just to kind of stick on the Cassandra theory and some of the pieces that you brought up there. I mean, if we look at our political system, and just we don't learn from history, when we look at other nations like China and Russia, they're playing the long game against us, right? And we've seen that here, in recent days. When we look at our current political system, where we're looking at 4-year cycles, right? We're managing the country on 4-year cycles. We're managing corporations on quarter to quarter and performance of quarter to quarter. How do you think that applies to the ability to look at history and learn from history?
Michael, I think your question is fantastic. And not only do we have 2-year cycles, 4-year cycles, we have quarterly cycles for reporting. And that's the aspect of America that does put us behind the 8 ball a bit versus autocratic nations where they can really play the long game. The CCP under Chairman Xi is able to have 20-year plans. Putin obviously has had a 22-year strategy that he's done a very nice job executing until very recently in Ukraine. But I wouldn't say that ultimately we're at a disadvantage. I'd say the great advantage of America and other free and fair systems is exactly that we're free and fair, and we enable, empower, invest in, and reward entrepreneurship, experimentation, and hopefully diversity and equality, right? So those are things that we have that they, by definition, do not have. So let me show you an example of where that matters. Right now, Putin on the battlefield. Why are so many generals dying? Have you ever heard of 6 or 7 generals dying in the first 3 weeks of a war? I haven't. I've looked. It's bonkers. Why is it happening? Because the generals are unable to get these fighting units or supply units or any unit they need to do what they need to do, because the leadership of those small groups are not trained like our military is in entrepreneurship, decision-making, experimentation. I'm using the word experimentation for a reason. I'll get to it. So those generals are running to the front lines to move things, and they're getting killed because they have to, because the system's breaking down. So there's a small example inside a military conflict where the lack of entrepreneurship and openness is, they're paying a price for that. I would say Putin probably is also paying a price for that strategically. And I think the picture of him sitting 20 feet away from his advisors is kind of all you need to know. Autocrats make mistakes more than democratic systems make mistakes, if for other reasons, because it's one person's more fallible than a group. But yes, we do suffer from the long range problem. China, very quickly, much better, less emotional decision making than Russia, I would say. Very, very competent, extremely competent mid-level, senior level government executives and diplomats. In my time negotiating with them and spending time with them, they're unbelievably competent. They're going to do better, but they suffer from the same problem, right? So inside a communist system, you can't really spur entrepreneurship. So Xi right now just moved 300 million people from poverty to middle class. That was his last big move. It was impressive as far as that goes. But to do it, he had to embrace capitalism. Capitalism means billionaires and capitalism means millionaires. He doesn't want billionaires, so he's cut their heads off. Well, I shouldn't use that because he will cut people's heads off. He has shrunk them. He's removed some of their power, and he doesn't want any more millionaires. So he's stuck between this dilemma of, boy, capitalism helps me get the economy to move. I don't want to create super empowered, really wealthy individuals. So yes, we are behind the 8 ball on that. And I want to get to this last point. I spoke at the beginning, 2 points. I spoke at the beginning about the concepts that make America and Western or free democracies great. You don't have to listen to me describe that. You know what they are. Why are we the city on the hill, etc. I do fear, and I hope we get to it, a toxin, a poison, a cancer that is killing that is undermining the thing that does make America so special, that does make Western democracy so beautiful and so powerful. And the reason we do win in the long term. I fear we're killing that, and we'll get to it. I hope we call it the bewilderment. It's the social media algorithm. It's the othering. It's the divisiveness. It's the lack of canonical truth.
I mean, my co-host Tom Cowan unfortunately can't join us today. He usually keeps me on track. We are way off track from our typical format.
That's all right. I like that question. I hope the audience did too.
Yeah, I think it's great. But I'm gonna keep us off track, right? So bringing this concept of not learning from history and seeing things that are so obvious, but no one wants to talk about it, right? Let's talk about social media, right? And when we look at social media and the days of Cambridge Analytica and what we learned from that, this concept that I'm talking to folks out there today who potentially have some influences, this concept of in social media, why do we allow people to be anonymous on these platforms, completely anonymous? And why aren't these platforms, allowing people maybe to anonymize themselves, where we can go back and say, hey, I know I'm talking to RP on the other end here. Don't you think there's just some sense of common sense there? How do you feel about that? Should we force or try to push social media platforms that prevent kids who are clearly 12 years old opting in and saying they're 18 years old?
Thank you for talking about social media. This is a big advocacy issue of mine. And I think we've made a little progress in a very dark area, but you're exactly right. That's what we call this. The phrase I use is the bewilderment. The social media algorithm, AI-driven social media algorithms have proven to be the most profitable mining tools in the history of the world. They are much more profitable than Standard Oil's drill bits. They're much more profitable than Microsoft's creation of software. They are mining tools. They are natural resource extraction tools that have created the greatest, centra-billionaire, trillion-dollar companies in the history of the world. This is well described in The Social Dilemma, produced by Tristan Harris. They do this because they are actually weapons-grade psychographic tools that target our limbic system. They target our cerebral soft spots. They target our Paleolithic minds, and they quote unquote limbically hijack us. This is kind of described in The Great Hack, which talks about Cambridge Analytica, which you mentioned. These tools know that my father can't put his iPad down if it's about something where he possibly could protect somebody. They know his limbic soft spot. He thinks of himself sort of as a sheepdog. We're sheep. There's wolves out there. He wants to help. So he can't put down his iPad if MSNBC, Fox News, CNN, or the Drudge Report or whomever shows him that literally there's a coyote attack in California, there's a bridge collapsing in Minnesota, or there's a dam busting in New Orleans. Somehow his brain is tuned into, he has to stay on top of that, though he's retired and he'd rather be playing croquet. That's his limbic soft spot. My wife's is, beautiful, cute things. And now the outcome for my mom and my dad and my wife are different. It creates high anxiety in people who are shown fearful things, and it might actually create positive emotions in some instances with others. But nonetheless, they're zeroing in on our limbic system and our soft spots. What they're ultimately doing for a large part of America is creating high conflict. So what they're doing, there's a lot of ways to think about where you sit in the world, Michael. Where do you sit? Where do I sit? Am I a Dem? Am I a Republican? Am I urban or am I rural? Am I black? Am I white? Am I rich? Am I poor? Am I East Coast? Am I West Coast? Am I young? Am I old? Am I straight? Am I gay? Am I male? Am I female? Lots of points of differentiation, lots of studies on how it hits those things. I'd suggest to you, as taught to me by my friend Mo Alethy from Georgetown, what it really does is it shows you if you're in the front or the back. I think it shows you if you're in the front of the line or you're in the back of the line. And what that means is it going to spice up your mimetic reflex? I want what she has. The grass is always greener, keeping up with the Smiths, all these stories we know. I want what she has. So is it if I'm in the back? Or what do I need to do to stay in the front? I'm going to make the people behind me feel like they're in the back, right? So this is just as simple as Instagram, everyone producing their best selves, literally renting sound stages that look like private jet interiors to take photos of them and their buddies and putting on Instagram. And what's more pathetic than that? That sparks mimetic reflex. Quickly back to China. They know it. You're not allowed to use TikTok too often and too many hours a week if you're a young person in China. The Chinese government literally bans it. China pushes in the very viral TikTok app in China. They push things about learning, education, engineering, STEM. In America, of course, the company again goes to our limbic soft spots and makes us think we're in the back of the line and finalize divisions, right? So what it does, what this social media algorithm does is proves to you you're losing. Things you care about are being taken from you. You care about your guns, your Bible, the left's taking it from you. You care about democracy and freedom and equality, the right's taking it from you. They are, if you want to see this in real time, look at MSNBC or look at Fox. It's the exact same memes. That's not by coincidence. What happens on those profit-seeking media TV channels now is they're totally driven by the algorithm in social media. They know how the clips play on social media. They make money on playing the clips on social media. They create the TV clips on TV from the social media algorithm. So do the newspapers. So it is.
But is that,
virus
I just want to interrupt you there. I want to catch that point there. Is that the end? Is it money? Is it, what is the purpose
three types of
doing
profiteering? So there's profit for the platforms, right? So Facebook, YouTube, Facebook, which is Facebook and Instagram, Google, which is YouTube, TikTok, which is independent. They are for-profit platforms that, back to your point earlier about they have to report to their shareholders. And I tell you what, you want to make money, limbically hijack people, make them click all day, turn them into the matrix, turn them into little machines pressing screens. And if you think that's a problem, if you don't think that's a problem, remember your dining experience 12 years ago, where maybe one person would pull out one phone and be like, wow, that's kind of rude, to what it looks like now. Go to the restaurant, look around you. If you can, I promise you, 75% of the people under the age of 20 are looking at their screens for more than half of their meal with their families. That's horrible, right? And a lot of the adults are too. That's where we are. It is taking over our mind. Like it's mining us.
We know, I mean, this is obvious, right? To me, it's common sense.
So
I think to you, it's common sense, right? Well, how do we stop this? What do you recommend?
I didn't answer, which is the three. I think there's three types of profiteers. So there's the for-profit platform, and there are tools to motivate their behaviors. There also are three types of profiteers that are engaged in this. One is political profiteering. So I'm a better candidate than him or her. Let me tell you why. Now look, yes, we've always seen, Richard Nixon claimed that his opponent was a communist with pink panties, right? This has gone on forever, but now they do it inside a social media platform where it's deeply weaponized, psychographic weapons grade tools, tuned in by person to where they're going to have the most limbic impact, right? So one is political profiteering. The other is just $4 profiteering, right? Buy my ivermectin, buy my hydroxychloroquine, listen to my podcast where I question the vaccine, listen to my podcast where I tell you that, people who you otherwise should respect in white lab coats who work for the US government are actually profiteers. I make money. These people make money off their podcasts, off their books, and off selling crappy products, dangerous products to America. So there's like snake oil salesman profiteering, which has this new aspect of getting paid for your YouTube videos and your likes and your Instagrams and all that crap. A lot of money being made there. And, when it becomes really hard is folks like, I don't remember all their names, but the folks who are, bona fide PhD MDs who are probably on the edge of their field, meaning they're not crushing it in the field already. They get on the screen, they work with those of us who have softer minds, and they say, hey, I invented mRNA vaccine. By the way, he didn't. And let me tell you how dangerous this is. By the way, it's not. Let me show you graphs that show that the mRNA vaccine spike aspect lingers in women's in their ovaries. By the way, complete baloney, totally wrong. The guy's making a ton of money with these videos and selling stuff, right? So there's that kind of profiteering. And the third one is nation state, adversary state, right? So this is the Russians getting Tucker Carlson to promote Putin as he commits this tremendous murderous war crime against the free nation of Ukraine. And Tucker Carlson is on TV defending this happening because whatever's in Tucker's mind, but also because the social media algorithm rewards it. And because the Russians for years and years have paid to have social media influence on these platforms through FSB funded shadow corporations have paid to influence all of us through these shadow through these platforms. So that's the third level of profiteering. So there's the platforms, for-profit businesses, three levels of profiteering. People make money. They make their political bones off of it. They make money or they have adversary nation influence.
Let's kind of stick on that third one, right? The nation state, because unfortunately it's in front of everybody's mind, and we're all looking at Ukraine and hoping it de-escalates here shortly. But and tie in this concept of where do these organizations, these FSB sponsored websites, right? How far do we need to go to say, hey, that we should stop that, right?
So
At
that's
what
the
point?
easiest part. FSB sponsored hacking groups, FSB layers of money going through front companies. Let me first give you a stat. And this will not be numerically perfect, but it is absolutely directionally accurate. One I know is correct. So I think it was the week before January 6th, the 12 most popular Facebook groups. So if you're not on Facebook, a group is where you have your Facebook page, and there's handsome Michael on his Facebook page, and he talks about stuff he cares about and photos of his family or whatever. And then you can join groups like, here's a group for this podcast. Let's get together with Tom Cohen and Michael Aboud, and here's your group. All right, fine. I can go in this group. It can be a closed door, an open door, and we can chat inside the group. And there's a lot of use of groups inside Facebook. All right, so now we know what it is. The 12 most popular evangelical Christian groups on Facebook the week before January 6th. The six of the 10 most popular BLM groups on Facebook in the week before January 6th. And I think it's like 10 of the 12 or something, say 80% of the top 10 most popular LGBTQA groups on Facebook. Okay. Of those groups, all of which were pushed to 140 million Americans, pushed. People didn't search for it, find it, click it. Facebook recommended, we think you might like this evangelical Christian site, this BLM site, this LGBTQA site. You might like these things. Would you like to try them out? Here's a free sample. Come take a hit. It won't kill you. Try it out. Right? So that was pushed to 140 million Americans, seen by 120 million Americans. The number is something like that, right? Okay. Of those sites, the numbers I gave you, they all were created and controlled by Russian bots. They all were fake. They all were controlled by Russia. Hundreds of millions of Americans were pushed in engaging in conversation groups controlled by Russian bots. Now, that might seem ridiculous. Go look at Francis Haugen's leaks. You can see the actual Facebook documentation that says as much. I mean, holy shit, right? Check this out. So I had a conversation with someone I shouldn't say actually, quite a bit, who was one of Donald Trump's top evangelical advisors. And I said, did you know this? We were actually sitting at a table where we were both revealed. This was revealed to both of us at the same time. Did you know this? And he said, I didn't know that, but I believe it. Why do you believe it? Because on January 6th, he's a minister. He's like he's a major evangelical minister. On January 6th, I called up all my faith leaders across the different Christian faiths and Judaic faiths, whoever he calls, and said, we have to get on the horn. We have to get on social media, get on TV and say, stop the violence. We don't have to take an opinion on stop the steal. We don't have to take an opinion on the politicians, but we got to say no violence. And so they tried. And he said, we tried, and we got to Facebook, and I posted, and we just it was like fighting against a concrete wall. We couldn't penetrate these other sites that were owning the narrative and owning our conversation partners. So he actually saw it in real time. Not only were the Russians controlling these sites, but then when the good guys showed up and said, let's try to fix this, they couldn't penetrate the conversation space. That's a big deal. So that's easy to fix. I'll tell you how. If I took $20 from an FSB, layered company to try to divide U.S. military enlisted people from their officers using social media, or divide the national security advisor, H.R. McMaster, from Donald Trump using a campaign that says he's a rhino and he hates Trump and he said lies about Trump, all of which the Russians did. They paid Facebook for ads and space and time to push memes that said the national security advisor is making fun of the president. They pushed that to the point where the national security advisor, who's chairman of one of our businesses and a friend of mine who I hold in very high esteem, H.R. McMaster, was unable to have conversations with the president because the president was believing the social media, the Russian disinformation, social media generated lies. And so it severed part of the command and control apparatus. That's a great way to spend a couple $100,000, isn't it? So if I did that from my company, I'd be talking to you from behind bars in an orange jumpsuit. But somehow these firms are able to do that and get away with it. So there's fixes there. The other stuff becomes much harder. Anonymous, bullying, all these things are much, much harder. But what I will say, there are a huge number of dials available to these social media firms. They have dials to control how sticky they are. They have dials to control how much they moderate, dials to control how much money they spend on getting in there and fixing things and taking away disinformation. They absolutely can change those dials. They can change the stickiness of the algorithm, the amount of policing they do, the amount of effort they put into making the message better and healthier and removing some of the limbic hijacking, and not change their profitability by very much at all. I'm talking like 1% differences can have massive impacts on the quality of the content. And then I would say, and I'm sorry, I'm sort of introducing it this way, I believe that horrendous content and limbic hijacking of so many of us, including those of us who are not on social media, even those who don't watch TV, and we can get to that. I believe it's so dangerous that it doesn't just cause young girls to cut. It doesn't just cause a 200% increase in suicide. It doesn't just cause obesity and depression and all these other horrible things. It doesn't just ruin Thanksgiving dinner when your crazy aunt says something you disagree with. It doesn't just cause folks to not talk to each other and their families anymore because they're staring at 2x3-inch screens. It doesn't just do that. It doesn't just do that. It destroys canonical truth. People listening to us right now believe the vaccine magnetizes them with, by the way, aluminum keys. Aluminum's not magnetizable, people, right?
And
They
not
believe
and
that.
not dumb people are saying that, right? I
And
mean, those
not
are
dumb,
smart,
and people who are not dumb believe this, right?
right?
So not only does it destroy canonical truth, what happens when you have no canonical truth means the accepted truths. The sky is blue, gravity holds you to the ground to the earth, and the earth is round, right? So these are accepted truths. What happens when we don't agree on these things? The election was stolen. The vaccine is deadly. Anthony Fauci is a billionaire. John F. Kennedy Jr. is still alive. Democrats have some weird sex cult going on with children. Like, what happens when you believe these things? Well, when you have no canonical truth, then you've destroyed what we call the epistemic commons, the ability to have conversations and disagreements and have progress nonetheless. Back to your first question. That's what democracy is based on, the give and take between opposing views that allow us to create a semi-unified piece of progress coming out of it. If we don't agree on the truths and we deeply hate each other, which it does as well, we deeply other each other inside a deeply tribal system, we have no epistemic commons. What does that lead to? Well, you tell me. It leads to the end of the thing that makes America great, which is democracy. It leads to the end of democracy. And I'll tell you the process right now, or at least recently, we're a democracy, okay? Democracies don't become autocracies overnight. They first go generally through a period of anocracy or aocracy, depending on your definition, usually anocracy, which means just really poor governance. Mitch McConnell calls it, please don't elect any more dipshits inside MAGA land. And you could say the same to the extremists on the left. So anocracy means we are appointing people who don't know how to govern, and most critically, don't govern for the entire electorate. They govern for the people who keep them in power. So if you have a leader who's just serving, protecting his group, then the other group is going to get angry and angrier and angrier, and that leads to violence. Violence is what kicks off autocracy, because the autocrats, the future autocrats, use the violence as an excuse, the Bundestag fire in Weimar Republic, Germany, as the excuse to create the autocratic nation. So I don't believe that that's a process we will enter. I believe that is a process we are in right now because of the social media algorithm destroyed canonical truth, the epistemic commons, there's no consent in the governed, and you're looking at the beginning of the end of democracy if we don't change this fast. Sorry, that was really long.
No, I mean it's amazing stuff. We could keep going forever, but I wanna just talk about the vicious circle that we're in here too and expand upon this. Who in their right mind is going to run for office? You talk
Oh
about we're
man,
putting
I talked to
dipshits
a
in there.
politician yesterday who I like. I'm not gonna say who it is. He's from a really, really big state, pretty red state, maybe going a little purple. This is a guy that left or right, you're gonna be like, yeah, I like this person, right? They're like, they want him, they have the right motivations, they want to make the state great, want to make America great. They've got I like the guy. And he was literally saying to me, I don't know what, and he wants to run for the next level office. He's like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Just as you're saying, Michael, he's like, I don't know how I'm going to do it. And he and I met watching one of the Magaland Senate candidates give a talk, an off the record talk. And this guy is smarter than heck, the one who gave the talk, and dangerous as hell. And by the way, people on the far left would be too. Okay. I'm not just picking on Magaland. This person was slick, bright, well funded, independently wealthy, and dangerous as hell because his answers were so snaky, so convincing, and so dangerously wrong. So he was, yeah, the election was stolen. He did that whole thing, but he did it brilliantly. Yeah, vaccines are dangerous. Yeah, there's profiteers in the U.S. government who own patents. Yeah, you should have the right to choose if you have a vaccine or not if you're in the military. Like, no, you shouldn't. I mean, like, there's a lot of rights you give up in the military, and that's one of them. And a bunch of other issues, and some nastiest aspects in immigration, etc. And and so this first person I mentioned, this politician with great aspirations and great talent, said, that's who's winning, right? That's who gets the votes. How do I do this? And I said, and I don't like ever being the person who says, I don't know. My mom would tell you that. I don't know how he's going to run. I don't know how he's going to be a candidate and not become a craven, non-courageous liar. And that's what on the left and the right people become. They bend the knee to, Bernie Sanders on one side, Elizabeth Warren on one side, or Donald Trump on the other. I want to be very clear, though. The whataboutism is not equal. We won't get into it. It's not the same level of depravity and danger on the left and right now, but it could be. It could be. So we have to watch those extremes. I don't know what the answer is, Michael, on how you run that way. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you and I think we're in a you were virtually presenting, and that's how we met to a group about a month and a half ago. And I look at some of our military leaders, some of our 4-star generals that are about to retire as amazing leaders. They have this worldly knowledge. They speak multiple languages. They understand society. They understand technology. They understand the challenges that this cyber threat that you've talked about, and I consider it a cyber threat. You know, why? How do we get those guys, to go and run for office without getting too political?
Well, one of those people I hold in extremely high regard, I mentioned before, is General H.R. McMaster, former National Security Advisor to Trump, a great armor combat leader, just a special human. He would tell you, wrong question. We don't want those guys to run for office. That the General George Marshall theory of our military leaders should stay as far out of partisan politics as they possibly can. I have a lot of sympathy for that view, and so there's part one of that. But the other aspect of these military people, not really most of the top level leaders, there is this Russian disinformation, the Russian limbic hijacking, the Russian use of social media absolutely has penetrated our law enforcement agencies and our tier one military units and our military units with white supremacist, autocratic leaning memes and mind viruses. And if you don't think that's the case, I see you have Fort Mammoth behind you on your poster. Go drive around Fort Mammoth and look at the bumper stickers and window decals. You'll see some threes. You'll see a variety of things that are indicators of people in that direction. And a lot of that is because of the disinformation from our adversary nations who we may meet on the battlefield, which is amazing. They're using American platforms to do that. So we have to think about the military is not going to ride in a white horse and save us. If they do, first of all, every serious leader you talk to in the military, when you talk about January 6th, or you talk about stop the steal charade, they say, holy God, You don't realize how terrifying that is for us. Military leaders, officers, or enlisted people, or NCOs, whatever, who really understand what the military can do, can't do, shouldn't do, are terrified of the idea of the military being the last line to determine a constitutional crisis. They absolutely want absolutely nothing to do with it. And if we get there, we have failed so dramatically. And we cannot rely on that. That's you falling out of an airplane, your parachute breaks, your reserve parachute breaks. You've got an inflatable mattress that you can somehow blow up with your mouth before you hit the ground. Like, we don't want that to happen.
So let's try to turn this around because we only have about 9 minutes left. Let's stop, saying your house is on fire and there's nothing we could do about it. Call 911 and not even give, the person the 911, not even give the person a phone to dial. Right. And when we look at just to reiterate the problem here, who wants to be a political leader? Who wants to be a cop these days? Right. You're getting
Yeah.
persecuted. Right. And it's the same kind of concept. And it's the whole social media thing, in my opinion, that's getting there. So,
and a lot of things.
What's the magic wand, that you see? Let's kind of learn from our experiences here in 9 minutes and solve this problem. Right.
Okay. So look, Michael,
how are we going to do?
I would think of this social media hyper, these weapons grade tools, and how they're destroying our children, our families, our dining rooms, our epistemic commons. I think it's the upstream problem to just about everything right now. And remember, we talked about my book earlier. In my book, we identify 7 possibly pending catastrophes, 2018, 2017. We didn't do this one. And I think that this is perhaps the upstream problem to just about everything, because it prevents our capacity to manage anything, right? It's the upstream problem to everything because it prevents our capacity to manage anything. It creates paralysis and hatred amongst our leadership, amongst our political class. We can't do things together anymore. It's the upstream problem. What's the magic wand? Okay, so what I'm saying is, like, man, it's hard. I have talked to, no exaggeration, I don't know, probably like 15 3-star, 4-stars, and cabinet members about this issue recently. I'm having a conversation with a bunch of them on Friday, closed conversation. My initial conversations with these people, including top strategists in the military and other places, including in the other NATO countries, my beginning conversations, me and them, really left with, oh my goodness, I got to go find the bottom of a bottle because this is really unfortunate. I don't know what to do. And then the conversations moved to, we could try this, we could try that, we could try this, we could try that. Humans are adaptable. Democracies are adaptable. We have fought asymmetric threats before, and we're going to figure this one out too. Here's a couple ideas. I already mentioned that I believe some of these social media platforms have real legal jeopardy inside the KYC function, know your customer function, of where they're taking money. I believe it's easy to prove they're taking money from foreign intelligence services, that it's a violation of federal law right there. I think there's something to pursue there and pay attention to. First time I've said that publicly. Hope you don't have that many listeners. Okay, number two, I think there's a lot to do about education. And I can't bemoan the crime of Russia's invasion in Ukraine enough. It's an absolute horror. But there is a tiny silver lining to all these murders, which is, we now look, humans learn by narrative. We learn through stories. Absolutely true. That's why social media is so brilliant. It knows the stories to tell us. Let's tell a different story. Can we tell a story that beats the algorithm? Here's one. Michael, when's the last time the world had a hero? It's hard to remember, right?
It's hard to remember.
Maybe Mandela. People say Churchill. That was a long time ago, right?
Mother Teresa was my hero.
Mother Teresa, great. But boy, we don't have a list of them. We got a bunch in the Marvel universe. We don't have in the real universe. So in fact, I'd say the world so badly wanted a hero that they gave President Obama the Nobel Peace Prize before he even did anything, right? Like, we really are thirsty for heroes. And, we have one now. You know who it is? Zelensky.
Yeah, Zelensky.
We have a real bona fide hero. And so now we have a hero. Well, we have villains, but holy Moses, talk about a vampirish villain in Vladimir Putin, right? My God. So this reminds us of the good versus evil narrative. This reminds us that there's villains out there. This reminds us of the danger of fascism and autocracy. We see it now. So if you go back to your initial question about China, you didn't say this, and I'm not sure you agree with me, but I'd say America, maybe you do, America's had a problem. We've exported our inflation to China for about 25 years. We've increased the quality of life in America for about 25 years because of manufacturing from China. Flat screen TVs, air conditioners, lots of things, medical stuff have come out of China. It's had a real benefit to American quality of life and reduction of inflation, right? It's had lots of costs. I believe that we are now funding our current and future peer adversary too much. I believe there's a lot of things happening in how we're funding China we have to be quite aware of. I believe it's very hard to get large investors to realize that when they can make so much money doing it. I believe it's very hard to get America to understand that life might become inflationary, more expensive, because we can't keep funding a system of government that wants to take over our system of government. And that's been a hard pitch to make for a long time. It's a lot easier now. Why? We're looking at Putin. We start off with clear glasses. They're getting redder and redder and redder. We now see Putin like Interview with a Vampire. We see him as this blood-sucking, horrible person through these red lenses. Then when we go get introduced to Chairman Xi in China, whenever that conversation comes up, the tint from Putin will still be on our lenses looking at Xi. We are going to be much more suspicious of totalitarian states now. I think that this narrative of evil versus good, of the costs of fascism, are going to be more obvious to us and help inform our decision-making on that. And ideally, it'll help us inform our decision-making on social media. Imagine what it was like 6 months ago saying, oh, Facebook runs FSB ads. We had Tucker Carlson going, so what? Well, now, if I'm saying Facebook runs ads from Russia, I shouldn't say Facebook, social media platforms run ads from Russia that are ultimately funded by Russia and pushed by Russia, and memes pushed by Russia, that looks a whole lot more painful and crappy to Americans right now than it did, right? So there's a little bit of value coming from that. So what I'm talking about is a movement. People need to begin to wake up to understand there's an issue here. I'll conclude by saying I'm working with a fantastic team on a series of narrative stories, movies, maybe mini series to take The Social Dilemma, Tristan Harris's movie, and to take The Great Hack, the movie about Oxford Analytica, and tell those stories more in different formats in a more fun way, get more people engaged, and take the scales off our eyes to realize the risk we're in, increase digital literacy, and see if using the power of American whatever it is that makes us great, we can begin to protect ourselves and our families from this. There's a lot more to do. That's a couple possibilities.
So we got to end this. I'm going to ask you one last question. Let's try to end it on a positive note.
Yeah,
here.
Sorry, you tried that before.
Yeah. What excites you most today? What are you most optimistic about?
My wife and my kids. But I'm most optimistic about. What am I most optimistic about? I'm an optimist, actually, and I'm optimistic that the good guys win. I'm religious. I believe that better things are in store. I believe when you start to count America out, you're going to be wrong, and so I don't think we're going to get this wrong. I'm optimistic that when I sit around a dining room table, or if I sit around a table with a random group of Americans, it's not going to look like a Twitter flame fest. It's not going to look like a Facebook flame fest. It's not going to look like some crazy YouTube video and commentary. It's going to look like a bunch of people who probably can learn to love each other, or at least care about each other, or at the very least learn to work to do some things together. We can do that. That's who we are, right? We're a country, we're this magnificent experiment that I have tremendous confidence in. But we're going to get destroyed from the inside if we don't regain the epistemic commons, if we don't regain the capacity to communicate on shared truths, if we don't effectively shut up the liars on both sides and the extremists. But I think we can get there. And I've seen leaders from the left and leaders from the right come together. I'm working on an initiative with Charles Koch and his group and Reid Hoffman and his group. So you've got the left and the right, not the far left, not the far right. But you've got clearly Democrats and Republicans coming together to say, we've got to protect commerce. We've got to protect innovation. We've got to protect democracy. And we've got to do it in an evidence-based, quantitative-based way where we stop letting the red lines, the things that would historically have terrified and upset us, we have to stop letting them keep moving. We have to figure out now what we stand for and stand together doing it. So I'm very optimistic about that.
RP, amazing stuff. I'm gonna include a link to the book because I'm gonna read it. I haven't read it. I wish I knew
Oh,
about
yeah,
it
I'm
before.
sorry, Michael. I should send it to you.
And look forward to potentially having you back on. Good luck with everything, and best wishes.
Thanks, Michael. I really appreciate it. Thanks for letting me talk so much. It was that second cup of coffee kicked in. Have a good one.